Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a really exciting panel titled It's All About Code. In German, alles dreht sich Software programmieren. We already ran two super awesome workshops this morning. They were the workshops that were sold out within an hour once they showed up on the website to sign up for. And we had a lot of fun. People learned this morning. In one workshop, they learned how to code the website of Airbnb in one workshop. And in the other workshop, they learned how to code a little game with a jumping gorilla and a little monkey that needed to get to a wiggly tree. So we had awesome fun this morning. And the good news is that since the workshops were so successful, we're going to run at least one, if not two more, tomorrow afternoon. So, yay! I highly, highly recommend that tomorrow morning you walk straight up to the workshop counter and sign up for the two additional workshops tomorrow afternoon. And I'm sure after this panel discussion, every single one of you will do that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists. And I will start with Rachel, who is on my far right. Rachel Swidenbank is in charge of international business at Codecademy. That's a website where you can actually learn how to code. And then here in the middle, that's Titus. She co-founded Girls Who Code, and it's her big goal to bring more women and girls into coding. And this is Jocelyn Leavitt. Leavitt, yeah. Who just ran the workshop, the Hopscotch workshop. Hopscotch, she's the co-founder of Hopscotch. Hopscotch is an iPad app geared to 8 to 12-year-olds. We had a lot of people who were not 8 to 12 during the workshop today, and we had a blast doing it. We'll show a little bit of the fun later on. So, let's get going with the first question. The biggest question is, at least in the United States, coding is the it word, the buzzword at the moment. Everybody talks about coding, everybody wants to learn how to code. But to be honest, why should we, all of us, why should we learn coding? What's the big deal? Kristen.
There are so many good answers to that question, but I'll start with the question for everyone in the audience. How many people in the audience have a smartphone with them today? Okay, and how many people in the audience spend somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a day on that smartphone, on their computer, in a car, and with some other technological device? Mine is a lot bigger than 8. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're seeing 3D printers creating homes. We're seeing self-driving cars redefining how communities work. Yet, the majority of us in this room don't know how to make those devices work. We don't know how to make them serve us and our communities better. And at the same time, 70% of jobs in this industry, 70% of computer programming jobs will go unfilled by the year 2020. It is clear. This is why we're talking about it nonstop. This is why we're here on stage today. This is why both of these workshops were sold out in minutes. This is the 21st century skill, and it is the tool with which we are going to cure diseases and make the next best innovation to change lives.
So one way to learn how to code is Codecademy. And I think we'll start with running the video for Codecademy, so we'll see a little bit what's going on, and then Rachel will explain it a little more.
There are 24 million people learning to code with Codecademy, and I'm proud to be one of them. I remember very specifically writing my first Hello World and just thinking that this is magic. Wow, that's coding. I can create anything now. What Codecademy really did for me is give me the ability to create the things that I imagined. It gave me a sense of purpose. Coffitivity was the first project I was involved with that really exploded. And to think that one of the 50 best websites built in 2013 was built by two people who had been coding for 1 month and 3 months respectively. If you're able to take the things that are in your head and make them a reality, you will be more likely to live the life that you actually want to live. My name is Tommy Nicholas. I'm the co-founder of Knox Payments, and I'm a Codecademy user.
I don't know if everyone in the audience picked that up. This guy, Tommy, took a Code Academy class for 1 month, and his buddy took it for 3 months, and they started a website that ended up being one of the best 50 websites of that year. So it's not rocket science. It's not something that you have to do for 8 years and get a master's degree. It's just something that you have to get started on. So Rachel, how does Code Academy work?
So at Code Academy, we believe that anyone, anywhere should have access to be able to learn the skills that are needed in the evolving world of technology, and then lead them to jobs that are here for the 21st century. And Tommy's just one example of somebody who did that. Our platform is online. All you need is the internet to access. It's completely free. And we offer courses across a range of languages. We offer projects that allow you to build your own website, which was one of the workshops that we ran earlier today. So you can learn front-end languages. So that means things that you see, that you interact with, like HTML and CSS. You can learn jQuery, JavaScript, and you can also learn some back-end languages. And by that, I mean the things that how it makes it work. So sites like YouTube or even Code Academy, we use Ruby. You can learn those languages on our site too, and that will enable you to do just like what Tommy's done. He's created his own business. It will allow you to upskill yourself and find a new job. We have one example, a guy in the UK, his name's Tim, and he completed some Code Academy courses, and within a year, he actually managed to double his salary from the skills that he'd learned that he'd gone out and taught himself through Code Academy. So it's an interactive platform that allows anyone to be able to learn how to code and learn the skills that are needed for jobs today.
So one of the biggest questions I always have is, coding. I always think you have to be a math whiz to do it. It seems so scary and so mathematical. So do you have to be Einstein to learn how to code?
Absolutely not. I always think this question could be asked the other way around. I think the great thing about programming is not only do you learn a hard skill such as coding, which will allow you to then go on and get a job, but it also teaches you computational thinking. So you learn concepts such as abstraction and algorithms, decomposition, pattern recognition, I could go on. And all of these skills are so applicable to everyday lives. So for me, like programming, it's not just about learning to code, it's about learning how to think. So if you take that in turn, I almost think learning to program could actually help you become that maths genius.
Do you guys agree?
Very much so. I'm Jocelyn, I'm the co-founder of Hopscotch, and Hopscotch is a programming language on the iPad, specifically made where you drag and drop visual blocks of code to make your own code. So Code Academy, I think, with Code Academy you can learn a lot of the languages that Rachel mentioned, like JavaScript and jQuery and Python and Ruby. Hopscotch is an entirely new language, and there are thousands of these type languages out there, and dozens of visual programming languages like Hopscotch. And for us, a huge part of it is learning about computational thinking. You're not going to necessarily learn how to build YouTube using Hopscotch, although you could if you had enough storage space and enough time to actually do it. You could actually build YouTube using Hopscotch, but it would take you a very long time and take a ton of storage space. But what you do learn is you learn a lot of these concepts that Rachel talked about abstraction and decomposition and programmatic thinking in general, just problem solving, and those critical thinking skills are incredibly valuable and cross-applicable in a variety of different contexts.
Right. So a question for the audience. If you guys think about coding, if you guys think about a computer programmer, what's the first image that pops up in your mind? And I'll tell you what my first image is. My first image is a white 20-something guy in his underwear with probably a serious personal hygiene problem, sitting in the basement of his parents and just hacking ones and zeros into computers. Who has sort of a similar idea of coders? Huh? Yeah, not too bad, right? Okay, so this is one of the misconceptions out there. And coding is a lot sexier than we think it is, right? Rachel, you're nodding.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
fun.
Yeah, it's really fun. And I think often people are almost scared of coding. It's something that it scares a lot of people. It's like an exclusive coding club, and if you're not a part of it, it almost feels impossible to get in. And again, I go back to Tommy's story. I think that's just a great example of how we're starting to break down these barriers. You don't have to be that geeky, boring, nerdy guy who everyone imagines. Anyone can just start to write their first line of code. And we have 24 million users on Codecademy who have all done that, and a community of people who are all supporting each other to learn how to code. And we often break down that stereotype, and we have lots of female coders. And yeah.
It's powerful. It's incredibly powerful. It's a powerful mode of expression. It's a powerful mode of creation, and that's really sexy.
Nevertheless, there are not enough women in coding. That is one of the biggest problems. Kristen, you co-founded Girls Who Code, and the biggest goal is to get more girls and women interested in coding. So first of all, why do we need women in coding? Why should women get into that field?
There are, again, so many answers to this, and I'm sure many in the audience would have opinions. You know, the tech industry today is largely run by males, and the products and applications that we're using on a daily basis are created with one mindset, and that has real limitations. There are numerous examples in history of inventions made by women: the dishwasher, the medical syringe, computers themselves. Grace Hopper helped build the first ever computer. Spanx, we all love Spanx, all created by women. So, you know, in my opinion, we're really missing out on a lot unless we have women at the table building, creating, innovating, really helping to develop the next best thing for us, our families, our communities, and the world at large. Yet today, the numbers are pretty scary. Less than 1% of high school girls express interest in studying technology or pursuing technology in any way. Google and Facebook just released their diversity numbers. How many women are on the engineering teams are pretty dismal. They were, in fact, pressured to do so. And that's what we're doing. We need to change that, and I think there are several ways to do that, including what these women here are doing, but at sort of the base level, we need to change this misconception that programmers are 20-something smelly men in basements. Your words.
I was exaggerating, so no offense.
We actually, on our first day of our programs, asked each of the girls to draw a picture of what they thought a computer scientist was. And they were all men, all drew men. Many had lab coats on, interestingly enough, which means they don't even know what a computer scientist is. Problem number one. And all of them represented someone that looked completely different from them. And what Sheryl Sandberg often says is, you can't be what you can't see. And if there are not women on this stage and in this audience and in these companies, visible women building and creating, it's going to be hard to motivate that next generation of women to do the same.
I think something else that gets sometimes lost in the conversation is that coding at Hopscotch, and we believe this very fervently, is that coding is fundamentally a form of creative expression. And the creative side of it sometimes gets lost, especially at the earlier age. Kids equate coding with being good at math and science. And that, as Rachel said earlier, you don't need to be good at math to be a good coder. In fact, one of the best coders that I know got flunked out of calculus. There's a certain level of logic, and you use things called variables, which are also used in math. And so I think people see those and they're like, oh, it's math, and I'm not good at math, and so thus I wouldn't be good at coding. And part of our goal at Hopscotch is exposing the world of programming to people who wouldn't even realize that they might be good at programming and that they might actually love it. And we think that there's a whole world out there of people that might be really good at programming but have never even tried, so they wouldn't know that they might be good at it. And we want to sort of expose the beautiful and interesting parts and creative parts of programming to everyone and allow everybody to sort of take advantage of those things.
Right. Let me just throw in a question that we actually talked about back in New York when we had breakfast together. It was the question about, what does coding do in our daily lives? So coding, we think about that programmer and about people in Silicon Valley who make those apps that we have on our iPhones. But what can we actually do to make our own lives easier? And you had a great example with your co-founder who programmed this little cool thing.
Completely. So this is one thing that we sometimes like to talk about, how people who know how to code sort of have these superpowers and that they're able to build these things that, I'm always like, oh man, I wish I had a way to do X, Y, and Z. My co-founder, who is an accomplished engineer, whips out apps all the time just to fulfill her own specific need. For instance, she made an app just for herself and her roommate to split their utility bills every month so they wouldn't have to do it. She also made another app because she wanted to, instead of having to search the gym website for yoga classes nearby, she made an app that collated all the data of all the yoga classes that were gonna happen within a 2-hour time period within like a 5-block radius. And then she made another app. There's something very popular in New York called Shakespeare in the Park, which is where you get these free tickets if you wait in line or if you apply online. There's an online lottery, and you can get free tickets to these wonderful plays in Central Park. And she and I both love it, and we didn't want to spend 3 minutes every morning applying to this thing. So she made us. She wrote a program that just automatically entered us into the lottery for Shakespeare in the Park tickets, and we didn't win her, but her brother won them. Yeah, it was great. But I mean, that's sort of the kind of things that this is sort of the superpowers that you get by being a coder. Is you can sort of be like, fine, I'm gonna hack a way around so I don't have to enter the lottery myself every morning. I'll just write a program that does it for you.
And I had my own little epiphany lately. Living in New York, there are many peculiar things, but one of the most peculiar things is something called alternate side parking. If you live in New York and you own a car that you park on the street, you have to move that car about twice a week because of the street cleaning. And it's a very confusing system. Like on Mondays and Wednesdays, street cleaning is from 6 to 8. And then on Thursdays and Fridays, it's from 9 to 7. And it switches from the different sides of the street. So what New Yorkers who own cars do all their lives is they move their car constantly from one parking spot to the other, to the next, to the next. The result of which is that they never know where they parked their car. So this happens in my family a lot, about 1 million times so far. And recently, my husband, my 10-year-old, and we were walking up and down the streets in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, trying to find the damn car. And then my 10-year-old said, Mom, there would be a much smarter solution to this problem. We should just make an app. We could call it the Find Our Car app, and we would have the app connect with the car's computer, and then Google Maps would show up on your iPhone and tell you exactly where the car is. And my husband and we thought, oh my God, this kid is 10, He had the most brilliant idea. But if only we could code. And this is what we're talking about. It's not some abstract thing, some huge big thing. Sometimes it's just a little thing. Sometimes it's getting theater tickets, right, or finding that damn car. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the story that's not told. And we all talk big picture. You can be the next creator of the next Facebook. But it's these innovations, small, big, that really impact lives, create efficiencies, and think about the implications of those types of tools on the ground in developing countries. That's the story that motivates young women and engineers across the board, that this is the most effective tool and means for changing lives in ways big and small.
How can you harness technology and data and actually sort of use it to create solutions to problems?
Right.
And even through the experience of learning, so you might not be able to build an app yet, you might know very, very little of actually how to code. It's almost, you feel so empowered just having some knowledge. It gives you the confidence if you can understand what the different languages do or what they mean or where they could be used. And just the process of learning it gives you, really gives you the empowerment. I love it when my boyfriend or my dad come and ask me for help with their technical issues. And as a female, that just feels great. I love it.
And I mean, no matter what industry you all are in, tech is going to be so important already now, but it's going to be even more important in your industry. So you need to be able to talk to your coders. You need to be able to speak their language. And in order to do that, you have to have at least a little bit of a knowledge about, what's going on with these weird ones and zeros and everything. So let's go back to Girls Who Code just for one more question.
Sure.
What is the program? What do you actually do to get more girls and women into coding? How does that work?
So I'll come back to the question of what the problem is. And,
right.
and in the United States, that is likely the same in most countries. There is a lack of two things. One, access and exposure, and two, education. So a lot of these programs, including those on the stage here, are doing those two things. One, they're making accessible mentors from the engineering world. They are telling the story of what computer scientists are and what they can enable in the world. And they're pairing that with the educational pieces needed to make that happen. So today in the United States, the majority of states do not accept computer science credit toward graduation in high school. There is no accreditation for computer science teachers in the United States in most states. There is no one agreed upon curriculum. These are big structural changes that we're working together with all industries to really move the needle on. And at the same time, we're seeing a number of different innovators, again, the Code Academies, the hopscotches of the world, building and iterating all new programs to do this outside of school, in school, with children and adults of all ages that are really redefining what learning looks like, and in particular, what learning looks like for young women. And that larger movement has already seen huge gains. 3 years ago, nobody even knew what computer science was and really understood the nuances of how many women were in the space at all and what that meant for the industry. And today, it's talked about all the time. There are multi-million-dollar commitments being made to this issue, and how many companies and organizations that have cropped up in the last few years. So from my perspective, I'm very hopeful. It's women like those that are in the room here that are going to go back and talk to your kids, your parents, your principals, your legislators, to really make this a reality.
And there are a couple of exciting things happening all around the world concerning coding. In New York City, for example, coding is going to be introduced into the public school system starting in September. But the UK has even a bigger goal. Can you tell us about the UK coding and schools?
Yeah, so there's some really exciting things happening in the UK right now. Our national curriculum in England has changed for the first time, and I think it's the most drastic change since the curriculum was introduced 26 years ago. And they've actually introduced programming onto the curriculum, so now children from ages 5 through to 14 have to learn how to code in the classroom. And there's great things about this. One of them is it will really help address the shortage of females. Children will get into it at a young age before those stereotypes even exist, and it will give them the opportunity to learn these skills and make a decision for themselves about whether they enjoy it before the male stereotype takes over. It allows our children to not only be consumers of technology, like most of us are today, but they will one day be the creators. And it's just a really exciting time. And we're working, Code Academy, working closely with teachers to help train them, to prepare them for September. It's pretty soon. And to also help provide some free resources to help teach children in the classroom as well. And this, right now, the world's almost watching the UK, and slowly we're seeing it happen. So the UK is the first G20 country to actually implement this compulsory within schools, but it already exists in Estonia. It already happens in places in Singapore. We see Finland following, France are following. It's just been announced that children are going to be learning programming there again in primary school. So there's so much happening right now, and we just have to keep on reinforcing that this change is going to help our children in the future and give them kind of a passport into the jobs of the 21st century.
So you worked with a lot of British teachers in order to prepare them for the big launch in September. Are they more on the happy side or more on the worried side?
Yeah, so we've partnered with about 1,000 schools so far, and we're continuing to outreach on that. And there's definitely mixed emotions. With any big change that's going to happen, there's always going to be some anxiety. But I think everyone can agree that this is for the better of the children. And whilst the curriculum might not be perfect in September, it's phenomenal that it's actually changing and this is happening right now. And everyone's coming together, and there's great networks working to help prepare teachers and help make this as an effective change as possible.
Great. So that brings us to Jocelyn, whose program Hopscotch is already bringing coding into classrooms. And I have to say, I have a 10-year-old son who just finished 4th grade in a very good school in Brooklyn. We are very blessed and lucky. And this school he attends teaches coding since 2nd grade. So that's why he came up with that Find Our Car app. And actually, the school uses Scratch. That's an MIT program that's free and online, and it uses Hopscotch. And Noah likes Hopscotch better than Scratch. So can we run the second video, the Hopscotch video, and see what Hopscotch is about? Woohoo! So, Joss, this is so very different from what probably every single one of us thinks about coding. If I think about coding, I think about ones and zeros and that kind of weird computer language. There's no ones and zeros. There's funny little animals. How does Hopscotch work?
So, in essence, I think you probably saw that in the video pretty briefly. There are these blocks of code that you drag and drop, and you build routines. And a lot of the fundamental concepts, all the fundamental concepts of any typed languages are the same, in that sequencing is very important. You need to tell the computer to do things in a very specific order, and the computer follows your instructions, which is all, in essence, what programming is. It's just giving specific instructions in a specific order to a computer. That's what Hopscotch is, except rather than typing out the instructions, you're just dragging and dropping blocks of code to write your instructions and to communicate with your computer here. But you can still do loops. There are still variables. There's still conditional logic. There are still event listeners. There are all the things that you might have in a regular type programming language like a JavaScript or a Ruby. It's just that the way that you're actually interacting with the computer is not through typing, it's through dragging and dropping blocks of code.
So Hopscotch is actually geared to 8 to 12-year-olds. Why should kids who, I mean, if your parents in the audience, you probably think, oh my God, my kid is sitting in front of a computer too much anyway. Why should they sit in front of a computer even more and do Hopscotch? What's the difference between, Minecraft and Hopscotch?
Yeah, so I think that there should be sort of a distinction in your mind between what kids are doing in front of a computer. Sort of computers are another medium, sort of the way that like television or books are, right? And you could say, there's a lot of junky books that your kid can read, or there's like good, wholesome books. Same thing with TV. Like there's a lot of junky television programming that your kids could watch, and there's some very good stuff that you would probably want your kids to watch. I would say that with programs like Hopscotch, you can spend a lot of time in front of the iPad playing games and just sort of mindlessly going through something. One thing that we think is really important is the open-endedness and sort of the creative ability to build whatever you want, rather than being put within sort of following like a game and just playing a video game and going through all the levels and sort of mindlessly consuming content. You are, with Hopscotch, you're creating content and you're making new things and you're expressing your creativity. And so I would say, you know, if you're concerned about time in front of the screen, just think about like what actually kids are using that time for, because I wouldn't say everything is the same. It's not all created equal. And with Hopscotch, and with there are other creative you know, Rock Band. If your kid is spending a ton of time on Rock Band, I would be thrilled. You know, your kid is like creating music. You know, same thing with Hopscotch. They're maybe creating and building a new game, and that's, I think, different than sort of sitting back and like just consuming content, watching videos.
And if, in case there are teachers in the audience, if someone is a teacher and wants to use Hopscotch, do you have any help for them, like a little curriculum or something?
We have a curriculum. We have a curriculum on the website. It's free. You just need to give us your email and you can download the curriculum and get started. We actually spent some time on it, and I think it's a pretty good curriculum going over a lot of the larger computer programming concepts, because we recognize that, you know, like you said, there are a lot of teachers out there that recognize the importance of learning to program and teaching program to their kids, and yet feel ill-equipped themselves to actually do it. But I would say that, you know, as a teacher, if you are committed and want to spend the time learning it, like the concepts are sophisticated, but not so hard that nobody can learn them. I think you just need to put in a little bit of time, and then you can. And we try to explain it very clearly in our curriculum. You know what these different concepts are and how you can use Hopscotch to show them.
Okay, before we leave you all with one last cool video clip, we have about 5 minutes for open questions. Questions, hands up, please. Who has a question for any of the 3 panelists? Don't be shy. I know this is a German audience and it's always hard here. Yes, Steffi. There is a microphone. Can you, yeah.
So of all these different programming languages, which would you advise for somebody who has never done it before? Which would be a good one to learn?
Yeah, so it completely depends on what it is that you want to achieve. We recommend at Codecademy a great way to start is to learn some basic HTML and CSS. You can immediately start to build your own static website and actually see how the code translates into something very visual, and then slowly build upon that. So there's no one specific language that once you start to learn programming languages, actually you'll notice that there's a lot of similarities between a lot of them, and you can switch between them. And specifically in schools, I've been speaking to a lot of teachers, and what they recommend to their children and what the most common languages that are being taught there tend to be JavaScript and Python as the two kind of, you can do some interactive website front-end stuff, and Python is a great for the back-end side of things, so it allows you to build a comprehensive product or understand the comprehensive full needs of web development.
Okay, way in the back there, please. Can you wait for the microphone, please? It's easier for all of us. Okay, here it comes. Yes.
This might be a very naive question, but I like to ask it nevertheless. Everything has evolved from very complicated languages to drag and drop and simple things. Is coding in 10 years or 15 years from now is going to stay like coding, like you have a back end and it transforms to something else? Or is it going to transform in something there where you'll put just by drag and drop things together and you won't need any coding?
That's a very good question
to all of you.
Talk about that. No, it's a really good question. I think Jocelyn is the one.
Sure. So obviously at Hopscotch, we think that things are going more towards this drag and drop interface. Hopscotch was built on Objective-C, which is built on C++. Which was built on C++, which was built on, which is a machine language. So there are varying layers of abstraction, and the power. I think that. I mean, you're asking a really good question that I think a lot of technologists themselves are unsure of the answer and it seems to me, and it seems to us at Hopscotch, that the way things are going is sort of layers of abstraction away. But if you think about it, like even a Python or a JavaScript, those are built on other languages, and ultimately you're talking to a microchip, right, with a lot of ones and zeros, or a lot of switches rather, and you need a machine language to talk to that. And the folks that are coding in JavaScript, most of them don't know the machine languages that talks to the microchip, right? So there are just varying levels of abstraction. And we think that as coding becomes more and more important, we think that everybody is going to be learning the basic principles behind coding and be able to use them. And some of the best ways to do that are through visual programming languages and through dragging and dropping blocks of code rather than syntactically heavy typed languages. So that's one of the things that we are particularly interested in.
That's a great question.
Okay, we have time for
no.
one more question. Yep.
Is it working? Yeah.
Yes.
So I have a nephew who's 3.5 years old, and I want to know if there's if I can already give him something or show him something like a platform that before learning how to read and write in any language, he would already be able to start playing with it, or is there already something like for toddlers basically, or small children? And
Yeah,
like, when does it make sense to start?
So the reason that we're targeted to 8 to 12 years old is because we see about 10, 11, 12, maybe advanced 9, 8-year-olds is when they sort of have the sophistication and the ability to understand some of the more abstract concepts of programming. And that's sort of right about the age at when they are able to be like, okay, I understand how to use variables. I understand how to write functions and like write a recursive function. And some of those ideas I think are at an earlier age I don't think a 3.5-year-old is going to necessarily get. However, some of the more basic ideas around sequencing and looping, I think definitely a 3.5-year-old could begin to get their head around. And before we released Hopscotch, we put out a pretty cute, fun little product called Daisy the Dinosaur. If your nephew wants to try that, that's out there. There's another one that I've heard of called Codable, I think. I haven't really tried it, but I've heard, maybe a little bit older, like 5 years old or something, might be interested in that. So for younger than 7 or 8, you could try some of there are a few other things that are out there. I think Scratch Junior is going to be coming out in the fall. I've heard of that. So.
Okay, so we would like to leave you all with a very powerful message about the power of code. And the message is that you don't have to be a Silicon Valley computer programmer to make a difference in somebody else's life. We will, in just a second, run a video about a group of middle school girls in Texas who wrote an app for their blind schoolmate to make his life easier at school to find his way around. And it's a little bit of a tearjerker video, so that's why we already say goodbye, because after that we won't be able to speak anymore. Can we run the video, please?
We had seen Andres a couple times during our PE period studying the track, and we didn't realize it took so much work to actually get to know the school.
They have to live this darkness every day. No one can really feel it, and they take seeing for granted.
We were like, why not create something that will actually make a difference?
Hello Navi will use GPS and a location sensor, so that way you can have a specific point for each of his classes.
Where do you want to go?
The coding. It took weeks just to get it down.
If you mess up one little tiny thing, it can mess up like the whole app.
We made a difference in it, not just to him, but to many others that will eventually use this app.
They care about me, and that's why they made this app happen. Well, I never got to hear the word inspiration in my whole entire life. It made me proud.
I was incredibly moved when I saw that video the first time, and even more excited, all the folks in the video, including those middle school students from Resaca School in Texas, are joining us in the audience today. Thank you.
That was actually at the Google Developers Conference. That's where we got the video from. Thank you very much for being here. I hope you had fun, and I hope you sign up for the additional coding workshops tomorrow.